Harrison Price for Monday, April 21st, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center. And as always, this show a presentation of Bet365. Matt Harris alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches and conducting things. And a little bit of a change to our usual procedure here today. We are diving right into our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, and Foolish Winery. We will get to the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question here in a moment, but straight talking Jimmy. Rutherford lays it out, what went wrong, what they have to do, and it's all about keeping Quinn at all costs. Even bringing his brothers to town, Blake Price. What did you make of what we heard?
What a day.
At the year-end media availability for Jim Rutherford and Patrik Allvin at Rogers Arena?
I mean, it is, in some ways, I think what happened today is most admirable from the Vancouver Canucks, in that I think in 85% of the cases here, there was just unbelievable honesty. And yet also there is part of me, working in the communications industry that we do work in, of, did you guys think about the fallout because you're approaching it like this? Like there was a lot here, folks, and we'll try to drink from the fire hose as much as we can here today. But
it's going to take several days. You're going to want to keep it here all week.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this news conference here, and I don't know that the strategy, if there was a strategy, was that sound by them. And that's hard for me to say, Matt, because normally we are pleading with them for just be real with us, take us serious. And I still do believe that. But I think there's a way that you can do things diplomatically while telling the truth as well. And diplomacy was kind of out the window here. This was raw truth.
But we asked them to be honest and transparent, so I'm always hesitant to criticize someone in officialdom for giving us what we asked for.
But so much of this is active negotiations, Matt, and you're giving away your hand here in a lot of the cases.
But Rutherford has done this in the past and still been able to achieve what he hoped to achieve. I think Jim Rutherford got quite a sense of satisfaction, an ego boost. Also understood this is exactly what Vancouver Canucks fans were looking for and listening for when he first took over the job 3 years ago and endeavored on the Straight Talk Express. I think things went poorly this year, and so Jim Rutherford decided he would tackle it with as much honesty as possible, and I think he should be commended for that. He got very detailed here in terms of the plan going forward. We are going to hit on a number of topics on today's show, including Operation Keep Quinn, including the future of head coach Rick Tocchet, including all in on addressing the center ice position. What happened with Elias Paterson and JT Miller? What needs to happen with Elias Paterson going forward? Tom Willander, and this is quite a curveball, partner. I'm not sure anybody saw this coming. And the long-sought practice facility. And I thought those were some of Jim's best moments, as a matter of fact, including some of the humor that he sprinkled in throughout 40 or so minutes down at Rogers Arena this morning.
And it's funny that, there's a lot of news in today's conference. There was also stuff that they brought up that I don't know would have been drilled down as deeply if they didn't open the press conference like they did, bringing up the incident that caused the season to go off the rails. To me, like that was I think most of the media was going to get into the coaching, going to get into EP40's future, but vis-a-vis the JT Miller, I don't know that would have been drilled down too much.
I think he cut it off. But I think he cut it off at the pass. And again, I think he should be commended for coming out and addressing the topics that he knew Canucks fans wanted to hear about. And the opening of this press conference, we're not going to play the clip, But he sits right down and says, I'll start with the obvious.
Yeah.
And then talked about an unfortunate incident that hurt the chemistry of the team and made a trade created a situation where they had to make a trade that they didn't expect to make. And he came out and said, we went from being a contending team to a team in transition. I mean, that's 100% accurate, Blake. And I appreciated him saying that. He wasn't trying to pretend, pull the wool over the eyes of a savvy hockey market and try and tell them that your team is something that it isn't.
The seriousness with which he brought up the incident and the incidents, my takeaway from today's news coverage, it was actually bigger than we thought it was.
Well, I also think that he's some pissed off that it happened.
And he said it infiltrated through the entire lineup.
Yep. And this is, of course, the rift, the feud between JT Miller and Elias Paterson. And he concluded his opening statement by saying he feels like the goaltending and defense is in a very good place, but there is work to do with the forwards, to say the least. It took 30 or so minutes for the topic of Quinn Hughes and his future in Vancouver to come up. But when it did, with a very good question, I believe from Jay Janauer of Global, Jim Rutherford firmly aligned with Vancouver Canucks fans and said he understood that the gambit for this Canucks franchise over the next year or so is doing everything they have to do to keep Quinn Hughes happy and get his name on a contract extension. Here's Jim Rutherford.
Do you consult with Quinn? Do you let him know what the game plan is? And when do you start thinking about an extension for Quinn Hughes? Because I think that'd be one loss with this franchise. I don't know if you'd ever bounce back if he was to leave here.
Totally agree, 100%. The one thing that we will be sure of, that we will have enough cap space to offer him the kind of contract that he deserves. That's the one thing we can prepare for. And it may not boil down to money with him. You know, he said before he wants to play with his brothers. And that would be partly out of our control, in our control, if we brought his brothers here. So there's many moving parts here. Agree 100%. This franchise cannot afford to lose a guy like Quinn Hughes. And we will do everything we can to keep him here, but at the end of the day, it'll be his decision.
Well, that line about bring his brothers here may very well get Jim Rutherford in hot water with the National Hockey League, Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, on the subject of tampering. We'll see how much the New Jersey Devils pick up on that and what they have to say about it. Yes, it is true in a generic sense that Quinn Hughes has in the past talked about wanting to play with his brothers. It is also wholly true for Jim Rutherford to say that may not be in their control. Quinn Hughes is well within his contractual rights to play out the next 2 years with the Vancouver Canucks and then plan a bid in free agency where he joins Jack and Luke, who, of course, both play with the New Jersey Devils and are contesting a first-round playoff series against the Carolina Hurricanes, having dropped Game 1 yesterday. That brings us to our Surrey Mitsubishi poll question, Mike, if we can fire that up on the YouTube side of things. Should the Canucks offer New Jersey the sun, moon, and stars for Jack Hughes? You can vote yes or no. Do so at the Sekerson Price X and YouTube channels. For those wondering why we haven't included Luke Hughes on this poll, well, it's an awfully big bite at the apple to try and get the one Hughes brother, let alone two. And, of course, Luke is a younger player under a cheaper contract, so he is going to be most difficult to acquire. I mean, Jack's going to be difficult to acquire in and of his own right. But a few things with Jack. Number one, he's hurt. He's going for a pretty significant surgery here on his shoulder. And, of course, and we'll play you the clips later, Jim Rutherford talked about acquiring a top centerman via trade this summer. So, with all that said, Blake, what did you make of the comment? What do you make of the poll?
Well, first of all, in the comment, it's an interesting poll. It will get a lot of people claiming tampering, and it's something. It's not traditional tampering because there are no negotiations being had. Traditionally, tampering is, hey, we get to talk to our guy. You don't get to talk about our guy. You're going to sway him to signing with you early because you know he's a free agent to be and all that. These guys are all under contract for years and years on the Devils side of things. So, you know, there's no tampering to be had. Quinn's a free agent before those guys are.
Yeah, Jack is a free agent in the summer of 2030. Luke is a restricted free agent this summer. He may well sign a long-term deal.
So
well.
you're not really tampering, but you can't talk to these guys. So you're not really tampering. The Devils ultimately have last say if you're trying to acquire them because it's a trade. So it's not traditional tampering, but it's a step far in the general sense. We don't hear this sort of talk out of NHL GMs.
I suspect it will be at least a reprimand from the NHL head office, if not some sort of fine on tampering.
Let's hope it doesn't get to any draft pick levels of punishment. And as we know, whatever punishment you think for the Canucks, there's a tax. And as far as what I would do, I mean, I don't think they've got the ammunition for that trade unless it includes EP40. So that's effectively what we're asking. I think without asking it is, are you willing to offer up Elias Paterson plus to get Jack Hughes? And I think it's silly to trade for just the one. I would bring them both over and just make the package that much bigger.
Oh my God! Please.
Well.
You tell me you don't think they have the goods to get one and then say trade for two.
Well, it's a lot easier to trade for Luke Hughes than it is for Jack.
Assembly there,
but you've got the ammunition for Luke Hughes. You don't really have it for Jack unless it's Elias Pettersson. So, I mean, at this point, I would try it. Not me. You may not even be successful, Matt. Like you could put a pretty reasonable and fair. Just because it's a fair deal, still doesn't mean the Devils need to take it.
Yep.
You know.
So here's what I would say. I would think that Jack Hughes is mostly unobtainable. I think there is a very narrow path there. A couple of years ago in the summer, I was aware of a number of NHL executives who thought the New Jersey Devils would trade Jesper Bratt before re-signing him to the contract extension that they re-signed him to. And the reason being is that there was a debate inside the Devils organization about, okay, we've got all this great offensive skill, but are we too small up front? Jack Hughes is small. Nico Hischier is small. Jesper Bratt is small. Dawson Mercer, not also. So their young core of forwards was small. Now, Bratt just played so bloody well. They went ahead and extended him, and they're enjoying the fruits of his labor here. He's had a sensational season. He's come in at under $8 million. Now, I don't know what this shoulder injury, the surgery, and the long layoff has done to Jack Hughes' stock with the New Jersey Devils operation. You'll remember when he signed his long-term extension, everybody said, boy, if the cap goes up, that is going to look like a hell of a deal for Jack Hughes. He's $8 million per all the way through 29-30. He's 23 years old, so that could still very well be the case. Of course, was having a good season. He's been a very good NHL player. I think there are two avenues where you have to pursue this. One is with Elias Pettersson as the bait, and that would be the summer before July 1st. The other would be virtually the rest of the organization save the deed to the franchise. Here's what I'm sensing, and here's why I think Jim Rutherford said what he said here today. I think they realize that even with the possibility of two good seasons coming up for Quinn Hughes and the Vancouver Canucks, they may not be able to cut this off at the pass. Scott and Rob Niedermeyer were hell-bent on playing with each other at one point. So for Rutherford to answer the question with the honesty that he did gives me a sense that the Canucks are already on this file, that it's active for them, that they don't view it as something that is way down the road that maybe some fans had thought or hoped, and that they have to be putting measures in place right now to consider how do we keep Quinn Hughes here and make him a Vancouver Canuck. So I voted yes. If it costs you Lekkerimäki, Willander, and several first-round picks, I think you absolutely have to look at making that deal for Jack Hughes. A, to keep Quinn here. B, to get that high-end center that you need. I think it's a high-wire act, but it's one that you might be forced into, especially if by next summer Quinn isn't willing to talk extension, because that's the game here, folks. If Quinn is not willing to talk extension next summer when he's eligible, then you're trying to make the best trade for Quinn Hughes that you can possibly make.
Yep. Yeah, and then you've lost all leverage and power at that point. I wonder if Demko gets involved in a trade like that to upgrade on Markstrom, who's been all over the map for them.
If it costs you Demko, it costs you Demko. If it costs you Elias, it costs you Elias. If it costs you DPD, it costs you DPD. If it costs you Lekramaki, Willander, or first-round picks, it costs you that. I think you have to consider all those possibilities because it's not a traditional trade. It is effectively getting a top-flight center and keeping the best defenseman in the world in your organization. And the other thing it does, Blake, is then it gives you the cards a little bit leverage-wise with Luke Hughes one day down the road. So I think the Canucks have to consider all possibilities, even paying sun, moon, and stars, even a trade that on whatever day it would go down, people go, look at this, it looks like a Lindros Hall or something like that. For Jack Hughes.
You might have to do them a favor too and take back bad contracts. Like maybe you have to include Roenick and then take back Dougie Hamilton, who has a no move clause, but you never know. Like you might have to do things like that to make it worth the Devils' while.
Now let me ask you this: do you think Rutherford's comments today put Quinn in an awkward spot going forward? Do you just think Quinn goes, yeah, I mean, I've always been upfront about it. One day we would all love to play with each other, but I'm under contract and they're under contract, and time for talking about that is not now.
And so that's the way it should have gone, is that the media was going to get there anyway with those questions for Quinn Hughes. So like he was going to have to face those questions, but they would have been in that tone. They would have been like, is that a temptation? Blah, blah, blah. Now, when the managers go out of their way to bring it up themselves, it seems like a game plan. It seems like a fait accompli, like this predestined thing that it's like a sci-fi movie. You're trying to avoid the thing that you know has happened in the future. How do you avoid it? This organization has been upset about leaks, has been obsessed with noise around the team. And yet saying things like that, this is what I'm saying off the top of the show about this honesty. Yeah, I guess it's honest, but you've now created noise by verifying that. You didn't have to give that answer. You still would have been telling the truth, but you didn't. We don't all just bare our personal lives to I mean, social media, sometimes people do. But you don't always just have to be a see-through
usually
visage.
Not 76-year-olds who run hockey teams.
Right. So I just think it does. It's more noise where Quinn, I could picture Quinn watching this news conference going, oh boy, more noise.
Yeah. Daily poll question, a presentation of Surrey Mitsubishi. We're right now giving you $500 off a new or pre-owned vehicle. You got to mention Sakarison price. And a reminder to score more, save more value, more savings. Bring Surrey Mitsubishi any offer. They will beat it. So go inquire about your new or pre-owned vehicle with the $500 Sakarison price discount. Also, bring them any offer you encounter. They'll beat it. Visit 13820 104th Avenue. Tocchet, another big unresolved piece of business for the Vancouver Canucks. And we got confirmation today of what we expected, that there was no world where the Vancouver Canucks were going to exercise Rick Tocchet's option and allow him to coach out the final year of his deal. They know full well he wants an extension to stay here. I think they know full well that Rick Tocchet has friends like Keith Jones in Philadelphia who have a coaching search underway. Here's Jim Rutherford addressing, what will be the next immediate domino to drop here, right? Whether Tocchet is coming back or not.
Do you want to talk about the coach?
Yeah, I'll take that one because I'm the one doing the contract, and I know that like every year or all during the year, there's always issues being talked about what the coaches want the general manager to get for them and how he wants to play and all that. I believe that communication's been good this year, and it's even been better since the season's ended because I've actually sat in a couple of those meetings, and it's been a really good dialogue, okay? We will not exercise the team option for him to stay. We don't feel it's right to have somebody here that may have his mind somewhere else.
And we poked holes in this.
And he's absolutely right.
When Allvin brought it up, we poked holes in this. Like, you can't do this.
Lawrence Gilman told us, and he's absolutely right, that's just not the way NHL teams routinely.
But that's a huge disconnect between Rutherford and Allvin. Like, why did you bring that up? Why did you go out of your way to point that out, that you have this leverage piece? Like, as much as it was never going to get used, and we knew that, why are you saying it as soon as, what was that, 10 days, 2 weeks ago?
I wonder if the owner was involved at that point, if he was pissed off to hearing all this. And Elliot Friedman reported this, all this talk about Tocchet going to Philadelphia. Also, Patrik Allvin is not Jim Rutherford. He does not have the same authority. He doesn't have the same level of decision-making. But, NHL teams don't want coaches. Usually, we've seen a little bit of this more recently. Some people thought it might be on trend. But NHL teams don't love coaches coaching into their final year. They're too easily lame ducks. They're too easily tuned out by players who are sitting there going, well, are you even going to be here next year? Not to mention the fact your head coach gets distracted about his future. So I was very pleased to hear that from Rutherford. I think that is absolutely the right way to go about it. And it sounds like the discussions have already been pretty hearty between Rick and Patrik Allvin, and now Rutherford joining the proceedings about the Canucks' plans going forward and whether or not that's going to satisfy Rick's opinion in terms of where this has to go.
And it sounds like that presentation is done as of midweek. The promise was there that this file will have a new chapter by the end of the week.
Yep.
And that means that they are articulating a plan to Rick Tocchet.
Yep.
Like, they've got a pretty good idea of what's going to happen this summer.
We're about to get to it.
Because they're selling it.
Yep.
They're selling it to him.
Yep. And if you're Tocchet, you want to know these answers. You want to know who you're coaching next year.
Yeah.
You want to know how you're figuring out center ice. Which brings us to Rutherford. They are all in on addressing the center ice position.
You could lose Brock Besser. You could lose Pius Suter. Where do you think you are body-wise, in terms of getting to where you want to be?
Well, we could lose those players. We might not. It's one of the reasons that we didn't trade them at the deadline, so we had a longer runway to make that decision. I think the biggest thing for us is to strengthen our center ice. And, I give our players credit. I mean, they give all they had in most of the games in the second half and got eliminated from the playoffs and what was it, the fourth last game or something, but that was without our top two centers. So getting that center ice strengthened, then you can do a lot of different things with your wingers. So that will be Patrik's priority. And if we can do that, it's going to make it easier to make our forwards better. But to answer your question, I don't know how many forwards we're going to need based on what I just said about the center ice. But if you want me to just pull a number out of my hat, I'll say 3.
I don't know, but 3.
I mean, I love when executives just utter the phrase, if you want me to pull a number out of my hat. I don't think he's wrong.
Yeah.
That's your top two center. That's Pius Suter or his replacement. That's Brock Besser or his replacement. Now, in a perfect world, I think you want even more from there.
Yeah.
But I think cap space is going to be limiting. I think assets are going to limit what else you can add. And plus, it was also clear that Rutherford and Allvin think a lot of the young players and the push from below that they're starting to see from Abbotsford. We'll get to that clip and some of those proceedings later in the week. That wasn't the first time. That wasn't the only time that center came up. And really, that wasn't even a question about center. That was a question about Besser and Suter and the forward ranks, and he veered it into the center lane, pun intended. He also laid out that he doesn't quite fancy the free agents, the centers available in free agency. Again, here's Rutherford.
to answer part of your question was, I think it'd be tough to do in free agency to get a top 2 center, because based on the lists that we've looked at, we're gonna have to do better than that. So it's probably a trade, and well, I'm not going to play on my hand.
We have those lists
probably
too.
a trade. Yeah, we have those lists too.
And you've seen me. I've been apoplectic here about the Canucks' narrow path to finding the center. And if he's got a plan, great, because I don't see it. Like the trade path to a legit one. Like there's a lot of people that masquerade. Like getting Ryan Strome doesn't mean that you've got a new second line center. Like that's no masquerades. If you're going to be a contender, you need a top 6.
But I think
center.
that's what he's saying, Blake. Like if he's saying Matt Duchene, John Tavares, Brock Nelson, Sam Bennett
are not
good enough.
Yeah, so then what is that trade?
I think you're seeing if you can get Jack Hughes out of New Jersey. I wonder about Dylan Larkin now in Detroit, and he expressed some frustration on behalf of the room today with regards to Steve Yzerman not adding to that club at the deadline and missing the playoffs again. Yeah. I do wonder about Bo Horvat still, if the Islanders are going to go through a retool, and we'll see what happens with Lou Lamoriello there. But yes, you're quite right. There are going to be few bona fide top 2 centermen on the trade market. And the other thing, maybe with the exception of Marco Rossi, Blake, I think that also takes some of the RFA offer sheets off the table. I mean, unless he's posturing, because I'm not sure there are many. Those are up and coming in ascension center icemen. Yeah. They're not bona fide top 2 centers right now.
And I'd say McTavish too on the offer sheet, but with Pat Verbeek saying they're hell bent on being a playoff team next year, I don't see how that jives. I don't see how you accept an offer sheet from the Canucks.
Verbeek is temperamental enough. You wonder whether he's made some decisions on young players there that they ain't it, and they're willing to move them for.
But I think they want to trade him for roster players.
Immediate help, yeah. Get better right now as opposed to waiting 2-3 more years before Mason McTavish turns into the centerman you hope.
I think you might be able to make a true trade with the Ducks as they try to get better, but it'll be a hockey trade, not a futures trade. And again, can the Canucks pull off a hockey trade, or are they going to have to talk to a team that is okay with futures?
Yeah. One more time with feeling. Here's Rutherford. Whatever it takes to get a center.
Centers are really expensive, of course, to acquire. Have you thought about what assets it might take to potentially acquire that? In terms of, are you guys open to potentially trading a first-round pick? Some of your top prospects, maybe on the back end. Do you think there may be tough decisions to be made in terms of the assets you're potentially going to have to part ways with this summer?
Tough decisions. It'll be expensive. But it'll be also very expensive not to get one. So we're going to be open to do whatever it takes, and probably on the trade market to get that player. Depends what level the player's at as to what we're willing to give up.
Do whatever it takes.
I mean, I love hearing it. If I'm a Canucks fan, whatever it takes. And yeah, it'll be expensive, but it will also be very expensive not to get one. He's 100% right.
Yeah. Yeah, the ramifications.
This is not a can you can kick down the road because the Quinn Hughes matter, first and foremost, but other reasons as well.
Yeah, the market pressure's there as well.
Oh, so for sure.
There's a lot going on.
I mean, we're not playing it today, but he got asked about ticket prices for next year, and he said, well, look, that's not my lane. I'm going to stay in my lane. Here's one of the reasons why ticket prices are going up. But Jim has been around a long time. He's fully aware. It was a 17-win home season, a disgruntled fan base. He did talk about the renewal rate is over 90%, but he knows full well what would be the cost of missing the playoffs next season again. All right, Elias Paterson.
Who's part of that center rights equation.
On a regular day, this might be the lead item. We're 31 minutes in here, and we're finally mentioning Elias Pettersson. Play a couple of clips here. First, from Jim Rutherford, outlining what happened this year and full-on acknowledging it was personal.
I mean, was there an incident? Was it kind of a relationship? Was there any more to it that you can share?
Yeah, well... Yeah, there was lots to it, and unfortunately, I'm not going to share it. I think a lot of things were personal. I don't believe that it was just down to two people. It filtered into the whole team. or most of the team, and affected the chemistry of our team. I do think that in a lot of ways, JT tried hard to help fix the situation. A lot of people in our organization worked on it. We had hoped that it could get back to where it was a year ago, because the same two players played a year ago and both had good years, and the team won the division. And so over probably a month or so, that was the hope of everybody. But to get into details of everything and what people were thinking, I don't think it's fair to the players. As you know, JT took a leave of absence at one point in time. I will say, give you a little bit more information so you understand the process, because of course, like anything, everybody wants everything to happen today, right away. This was a situation that wasn't as easy to resolve in a matter of a day or a week. But when we got to the point that everybody in the organization felt that it wasn't going to be resolved, we had to look at what all the options were. We approached JT about would he consider going to another team, and at that point he said he would. And then as a little time passed by, JT was getting anxious, and he wanted to make it very clear that he did want to be traded, and he would waive his right, his no trade to go to the New York Rangers. And so at that point, then everything was moving forward. But it was.
There's a lot
there.
Yeah,
well, there is a lot there, but that it was personal, that it did affect team chemistry.
That it was a lot.
That JT tried to fix the situation, that everybody in the organization was resolved that Miller had to go, that Miller was amenable to it, and then Miller wanted it to happen a little quicker. You may also remember the Canucks felt like they had a deal done with the Rangers the weekend before, I guess 6 days before they finally traded JT Miller, so I can understand that from Miller's point of view as well. I was told they had like a last supper at Hollyburn, JT and a bunch of his teammates, thinking he was off to the Rangers the next day. So
I want the skeptics to listen to what was just said, because there was no attempt to minimize this. And in fact, he amplified it. He made it larger than I think we originally had it pegged at. This was a lot went into this. It was personal. It decamped the dressing room, which is what had been reported, folks.
No, the reporting on this, Blake, aligns almost perfectly.
It really does. It really does.
Everything that Rutherford said in the Gary Mason interview in the Globe and Mail and what he said today.
So the next time people want to believe that the sky is not falling when it's reported to be falling, well, sometimes the sky falls. It does.
No, but I understand these players become heroes to fans, and so their brain just can't handle the idea that the two players hate each other. But bottom line, JT and Elise, they hated each other.
It happened.
So here's Allvin. And Rutherford did most of the talking today, but there were certain files he kicked to Allvin, and it's quite clear that Patrik Allvin is going to have to manage the Elias Paterson file going forward. And again, on any other day, a National Hockey League general manager coming out and saying he's going to keep his options open with his $11.6 million centerman would be your banner war font headline.
Yeah.
Today, it's one of just a number of those sorts of headlines. Here's Allvin saying he'd be stupid not to keep, actually said the phrase, not to keep his options open on a Paterson trade this summer.
Are you open to potentially moving him if you think that that's the best course of action for this team, whether it's listening to an offer, whether it's potentially shopping him, or can you definitively say you're not going to trade him at this point and he's going to be back next year?
Well, sitting here today, I definitely want to keep all my options open. Saying that regarding PD, we still believe in him, but I would be, I guess, stupid not to keep my options open.
And again, it would probably take something significant. But he's right.
Yeah. Rutherford
Gotta do
said
your
that
job.
Paterson was not prepared properly for the start of training camp and the start of the season. He said that became one of the issues here firing up. I do think you can connect what we were just talking to, where you have a competitive as all hell JT Miller sitting in one end of the dressing room, seeing a guy who got paid $3.5 million more than he did, saw him not ready to go at the start of training camp and at the start of the regular season, and was some miffed by that. He later talked about, Rutherford that is, that he was showing signs going in the right direction prior to this last injury, but then articulated everything that we have been saying about Jim Rutherford and his opinion on Elias Pettersson going back years now, everyone. Can you be a contending team with your top player getting points? No, you can't. He goes on to say, has to buy in to be a complete player. And he talked about how he's been in there every day now, working hard for the last few days, but he's going to have to do that all summer, and he's going to have to buy in to what the coach wants him to do.
But I didn't get that. Like, the only thing missing, the critical item missing for Elias Pettersson this year was points. In January, his teammates are banging the boards, yelling Selke for the effort that he was putting in defensively to help this team.
Mm-hmm.
His own teammates, again, in a divided room,
I'm not sure
chanting
it's not
Selke.
defense. It's commitment, Blake. It's commitment. It's not
but
defensive.
the hardest thing to do, the hardest thing to commit to in hockey is defending.
Yeah,
that is the hardest thing to do.
He talked about points, which I think immediately got people thinking defensive side of the puck. It was not defensive side of the puck. It was preparedness. It was effort. It was practice habits. It's listening to others. It's applying the lessons.
But Matt,
all of that is lacking with Pettersson.
But it's just factually wrong. If he put up the points this year, the Vancouver Canucks are in the playoffs. Like, that's what's missing.
But he was talking about winning a championship, not getting to the playoffs, Blake, and that's the distinction.
Well, I mean, walk before you run. I mean,
well, they walked last year. And they both looked at it and went, they think it's easy now. It ain't easy. He's still got a ways to go to be a championship centerpiece. Allvin talked about that today, where he talked about the first 6 games into the season, they were trying to put in place the steps that they thought they would have to put in place. And part of this was improving as a rush team, right? And scoring those sorts of transition goals, which were mostly absent last year. And then Allvin articulated, then it became a back to basics thing. And he said they played reasonably well, games 10 through 21. And then the injury started coming. That's when the style of play had to change. And that's when they started losing momentum. He said there were a number of times this year in the chase where we had a chance to get back in it and take that step, and it didn't happen, and the reason was maturity. That was also directed at Elias Pettersson, at least in my view.
See, I like these are the final things you refine on a player to turn them into a superstar.
Yes.
But the first things you do, the first thing is that the player needs an $11.6 million player. First thing he needs is to put up points. That's the baseline. Like that is the bedrock. Then defensive play to make sure that then you can talk about making sure that you fine-tune yourself. That's how you get the extra 10% out of yourself. That's why guys like Gary Roberts and others, as they got older in their career, were like, I'm going to do something different this offseason to make sure that I am the best player. That's usually the last piece. Early on, though, it's just flat-out performance. And if Elias Pettersson is performing and putting up points, this team is where they want to be this year. And then this summer, you're thinking, you know what? If you're going to be a contender, here's what we want you to do this summer. And it's a much easier conversation to have. Right now, the offense has been stripped away from the player. He's paid for offense. That's what needs to change. And for them to be quibbling about his, and I'm not, one can lead to the other. I'm all for him having a much better summer, but for them to say that it's about those sorts of details. No, not points. Like they're the ones that said it's not about points. It freaking is about points. That's the most. They need a top line center putting up points. Job number 1. That is job number 1. Get to his work ethic in the summer as job number 2. But we know he can be a 100-point forward. Get that player back. He used the old preparation methods to get 100 points. So whatever you need to do, get the 100 points back. Then you can talk about how many push-ups he does in the summer. Like, they're obsessing about this idea they have of the perfect specimen because they had it in Sidney Crosby.
Yep.
But that's not this player. So get the player back to who he is, which is a 100-point player, Selke Award nominee. Then you can try to talk to him about being Sidney Crosby. But just get your player back first before you turn him into Crosby. Like, it's maddening to hear.
You done?
Yes, now I'm done.
See, Mike, you'll learn. He's got the longest leash possible. There will be very few fired up moments from Blake Price when the tally light is on here. But when he's on, wow, I was getting my show, and Timu Pulkkinen redux there for a second, Blake. Few things. I think you are right in terms of part of the drop-off this year was because of the way Rick Tocchet was, quote-unquote, reprogramming him, and I don't think that was duly acknowledged enough by Rutherford and Allvin today. You say if he scores the points, the franchise is where it needs to be, where they want him to be. I would disagree with that because where they want to be, going back to Allvin's performance at this presser last year, is Stanley Cup contender. And I think Elias, with a handful more points, the Vancouver Canucks are a playoff team, but they're first or second round.
Right.
But they're not making any progress.
But even a 95-point Elias Paterson doesn't turn them into a contender.
50 points more than what he had this season. You're quite right. Because what makes them I think that's part of their point, is the points fell off this year because the preparedness wasn't there, because the practice habits aren't there. So,
but I'm saying even if you
I
forget
think what
that,
they outlined here today is that Elias has a long way to go.
But him with 95 points still does not turn this team into a contender. Turns them into a playoff team, but they're not a contender. Like they failed in surrounding him with.
It depends if
better
it's
players.
Elias Pettersson with 95 points, still being an exceptional defensive player, and most importantly, doing everything that is asked of him on and off the ice, setting an example like Daniel and Henrik did so that others understand what it takes to be a Vancouver Canuck, what they're looking for in terms of a standard, then he's going to help make others better as well. And I don't think they see that right now.
Pius Suter
I think
is
they
not
see
the
a
second
guy
line.
on an island for whom the game has come easy throughout most of his life. Suddenly now it's hard. Suddenly now you have to play through some injury. Suddenly now you have to play a different style vis-a-vis what the head coach wants. And a guy who's, for the most part, rebelling, who doesn't quite understand that, who hasn't reached a level of maturity to adopt all of the things that his bosses are hoping that he adopts.
And all that's fine. Pius Suter as a second-line center on a contending team, that is not a thing.
No.
Again, Paterson could have done whatever you want. 100 points. This team is not a contender.
Well, and I'm not taking sides here because I think JT is as much to blame as Elias. But if early in the season JT is trying to push Elias to be a better player and meet that standard and reach the practice habits and preparedness that Tocchet and others want him to reach, and Elias is further pushing back, that's on Elias. I don't dispute that some of JT's methods might have been ill-advised. I think he's temperamentally unfit, perhaps, to be the mentor there. But I do think there were issues in the dressing room early where guys looked around and went, this guy got $11.6 million and he had that kind of summer?
Yeah.
And he showed up in that kind of shape?
As
and
we
this
say,
is
as
just
we
an
say,
extension of last year where he continues to talk about knee tendonitis. Allvin said in the presser today, there are lots of NHL players who play through lots of ailments over the course of the year. Elias is going to have to learn that ain't an excuse, son. You've got to push through that.
As we say in parenting, it's not about the what of what you said. It was the how. And so JT is certainly guilty
Yes.
of that.
I think you're right.
But I also wonder, too, if Paterson was so put off by what JT was saying that he became stubborn in his I'm not going to change.
I think that's fair.
Just to spite JT Miller.
Well, not to spite, but I think he felt alone and on an island. I think he felt like he had the weight of the organization Rutherford, Allvin, Tocchet, and empowered JT Miller, all up against them.
Scott with the super chat. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. Proceeds, of course, going to the BC Mental Health Foundation. Do you think we will ever find out the real story behind the incident? Well, there's always going to be a he said, but
I think I think in enough time we'll hear more details about what's to happen. I think there's enough information out there that I've heard members of the public and people a little bit more in the know ask of me. I don't know for sure what happened, but I know there was something that night that JT got benched here on Grey Cup Sunday against the Nashville Predators. And I believe there was something else that week as well. But yeah, I think JT had a go at Elias in terms of verbally in front of people.
We've heard a lot of. I mean,
I also believe that the people had to be separated. I don't know that was JT and Elias. I think it might have been JT and a member of the coaching staff, perhaps even Rick Tocchet.
Yes.
But I do believe that there was the threat of a physical altercation that required peacemakers.
And again, just to go back to that clip, he was asked, was there one incident or was there more than that went into it? And the answer was there was a lot that went into this.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't think it was one moment.
Here's more bad news, although this contemporary, not historical. Tom Willander. He intends on going back to school, according to Patrik Allvin.
According to Patrik Allvin, yes. Now,
do you want to hear the clip and come back and discuss?
Talk about the extra reporting on this? Let's hear from the clip and we'll talk about the reporting.
Maybe you can speak to the contract situation with Tom Willander. What's going on there? What is the holdup, and how confident are you that you can get him under contract?
Well, I was aware that the Swedish national team had interest in Tom leading up to the World Championship for some pre-game tournaments there. His advisor has informed us that he was going back to school. We feel our staff has been in communication. Our development staff, Michael Samuelsson and Komisarek, has built a great relationship with Tom during the year, and they felt that he was ready to turn pro after 2 years in 2 successful years in Boston University. I mean, it's a lot of lot of money for a young player to pass on. But that's the information we had here as of last week from his agent, that the intention was to go back to school.
So since then, our own Cam Robinson, who joins us weekly here on Sakaris and Price.
He will join us Wednesday this week. He's traveling tomorrow.
So we'll have lots to discuss with him, but he leads the way, tweeting out, "I've been told in no uncertain terms that Tom Willander's desire is to turn pro rather than return to BU for a third season." But there is also an expectation of what he's worth compared to similar players drafted in similar spots.
And let's bring up then the tweet from Adam Kirsenblatt of the Hockey News, who has dug into the Puckpedia website, a great resource, and they have all the Schedule A bonuses available there, and every category a defender hits, they get a quarter of the total they can receive. If they hit 4 of the marks below, they get 100% of the bonus. So do we have them on the screen there? Yeah, we got them on the show. So 10 goals, 25 assists, 40 points, top 4 in ice time among defensemen, minimum 42 game defensemen on the team, that is, minimum 42 games, top 3 in plus minus among defensemen on the team in a minimum of, all these are minimum 42 games, 0.49 points per game, so are you half point per game player, top 2 amongst the defensemen in block shots. Do you make the end of season all rookie team in the NHL? That's a pretty high bar. Are you an all-star selection, all-star MVP? Again, those are pretty high bar. So Tom Willander in his camp says, basically, give us the Schedule A bonuses, and hoping that he'll hit 4 of these and get his bonus. And the Canucks, thus far, from the reporting out there, have played hardball on that.
Which is a strange place to play hardball because
I really don't get it.
There is a cap on this. Like, it can only get so bad. Any other negotiation with
and there are bonuses
with
you
the
want
UFA,
to pay. Like, there are no more performance bonuses with standard player contract.
No.
These are the only bonuses. They're a relatively small piece of your salary cap, getting even smaller with the cap increases.
Yeah.
And they're bonuses you want the player to reach because you know he's going to be a good player if he reaches these bonuses.
There's a ceiling on how bad this can get for the Vancouver Canucks. This is not a UFA negotiation. So, and this team really can't afford the loss in the loss column.
They're
PR-wise.
playing hardball because they can, Blake. The player has very few other options other than going back to Boston University or playing professionally in the Swedish ranks.
And you know, the Canucks, in their own right, though, like, they can't afford to have much more bad press. And again, doesn't mean you just cave, but in this negotiation in particular, with a raw rookie, caving is not the end of the world here.
Well, and I do wonder if this continues, whether Tom Willander will be squarely among the assets that the Vancouver Canucks are dangling for that top two center. And we've talked about it before. You look at the defense score now it's pretty good. It's even tough to see minutes for Tom Willander if you're bringing back a veteran guy like a Derek Forbort or equivalent. You have Philip Hronek on the right side. You have Tyler Myers coming back. You have Victor Mancini. You saw Elias Paterson play the right side and pretty capably. You saw Derek Forbort play the right side and pretty capably. You've got Hughes, Marcus Paterson, and Elias Paterson on that left side. Pretty good on defense. So I can understand this if Tom Willander and his camp are looking at it going, I think you're going to be in Abbotsford a lot next year, son. I just don't see a ton of available minutes for you when the Vancouver Canucks are healthy. And Tom Willander thinking, well, you know, I would have really liked to just drop into the NHL. I think I'm an NHL player. I've put in 2 years here at BU, not just the one. I'm 20 years old, top 15 pick. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
And the depth is certainly given some leverage to the Canucks
for sure.
We'll just trade you then, maybe.
Have played a game at the So look, I think if anything, the upshot today with Tom Willander is that he's never been more available.
Yeah, and might be part of the solution to bring in again a center or be a part of the change in the offseason the Vancouver Canucks need to make to be a better team.
Lastly, practice facility. And honestly, this could have been Rutherford's best moment in terms of humor, honesty, realism. He ticked every box on practice facility. Take a listen.
Obviously, it's a little long.
Let's not talk about that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But in that regard, I mean, you know, if PD were to say, I mean, he said he's probably going home, but if he stayed, he wanted to stay this summer. There's not a lot of ice in this town, and I don't assume you guys are keeping your ice in all summer. So where are things with that? I mean, I know it's frustrating for you, but you're not the only team like that.
Well, it's frustrating for everybody, but the biggest thing if PD wanted to stay here is he'd use this facility to work out, and he's probably not skating all summer anyways. And when guys come in early, we get ice. But here's what's happened with it, and I assure you we're going to get this done. Maybe long after I'm here, and maybe long after I'm even on this earth. But anyways, it'll get done. But we've tried hard to form a partnership with some of the local rinks, and you know, we need 20,000 square feet that we can build a dressing room on to the rink somewhere, and then just use the ice.
That's a big window of time that he's given themselves.
Yeah, well, he would go on to say, so first and foremost, I'm not surprised that several community partners have failed to reach a deal there. The Aquilinis tend to only do deals where they are winners. They do have a reputation around town, and I think you have a dwindling number of potential strategic partners there. I think that was very much what the preference was because they understood the expense of having to build it on their own dime and with their own money. Rutherford would go on to say they have many more people working on this than they originally had. And he went on to say, you're not going to trust what I say on this, and I don't blame you, which was a full acknowledgement that on a couple of occasions, Jim had set a timeline on this facility last year, in fact, and it didn't come to pass. So I think he in some ways neutered the whole discussion by poking himself in the eye, and I think that was very strategic and very well done. And he went on to say, it looks like we're going to have to build our own. There's a couple of parcels of land that have been identified, and he said it's going to take a while, which explains why at the front end, I mean, a 76-year-old said this may be after I'm gone from the organization or even off this planet. A little bit morbid, Jim, but I hear what you're saying. This is going to take some time. I think you can say at this point the Vancouver Canucks will be the last NHL team.
They will be, for sure.
With a suitable practice facility.
If they found the land tomorrow, it's not being open for at least 3 years.
Yeah. And the other thing and also, Blake, going back to our longstanding debate, I think now you have to shed any sort of, is it convenient for the players and where they live? I think you're on the hunt for a parcel of affordable land so that you can build your facility, and that if that is not particularly conducive to guys living in Yaletown or Dunbar or wherever the majority of the players live right now, so be it. I think that's just going to have to be the case, like Rye, New York for the New York Rangers. Not exactly convenient if you live in the city, but you get to live in the city. This is where you're going to have to practice. I think that's going to be the case with future Vancouver Canucks.
The other part of this that we haven't really got to is that is a not so subtle jab at the Aquilinis by bringing this up in the first place, because the Aquilinis are...
Well, I don't think he had any choice at this point. Like, I would hope he would have said to the Aquilinis, just so you know, I'm going to be asked about this, and I've got to lay it out now because I'm twice on record saying it would be done, and it's not fucking done.
I'd be surprised if they had that conversation. I think Rutherford just, puts his head down and says what he wants to, and
he knew this question was coming.
Oh, I'm sure he did. Yeah. I'm sure he did. That's why he had the quick retort right off the top. But he's basically saying, the guy that gets this reputation as being one of the richest men in the city can't come to an agreement on a real estate deal that should be within his purview.
We don't have people who want to partner with
as
us.
a developer. This is a land developer, for God's sakes.
It's with existing facilities, right? So you have a narrow number of people that you're dealing with here.
But Matt, you say that.
I don't dispute that it's embarrassing. I don't dispute that it says something about the Aquilinis. And I don't dispute that Jim Rutherford saying that may have landed hard with some of the Aquilinis. I would also think he's wise enough to know that he signaled what he was going to say to his bosses on this.
Here's the other thing, though, is that buying land in Vancouver is not straightforward, because everybody that owns the land currently in an advantageous spot, and again, it has to be like, it's not going to be in Chilliwack. Like, it's going to be in the lower.
But I think SFU is now a possibility, Blake.
But here's
especially
the thing.
with Francesco's ties to the school.
Even a place as far out as that, Matt. Mm-hmm. Like, that has value.
Isn't all that far out.
Whoever owns that land wants top dollar. Like, there's not much land available here in Vancouver. Sure. We've talked about this for the Whitecaps. So whoever owns that, they want top dollar.
Yep.
But again, do the Aquilinis, are they willing to pay that person top dollar for that land? Or is it, I'm Francesco Aquilini, I don't pay top dollar for anything?
Well, and I think that's why I think that's why I'd be stunned if he didn't have a conversation with the Aquilinis before answering the question that he did. Is, guys, you're going to have to buck up. There's no other avenues here.
There's no other avenues.
We've tried this. I've tried this for 2 to 3 years. My predecessors have tried this. Nothing has happened with good reason.
At this
now
point,
you're going to have to buck up.
At this point in the proceedings,
it's the cost of doing business in the National Hockey League. I understand you look at it as non-revenue generating space for the most part, and that a straight line item on the expense side of things, and that's not your preference. Guess what? There's no other ways around it. We've tried our utmost with partners. Nobody wants to partner with us on the deals we've proposed, or we don't want to partner with them on the deals they propose. So either we have got to change our position with one of those partners, or we got to do it ourselves. And it sounds like Jim's already halfway down the road of doing it yourself.
The majority of owners, I feel comfortable saying, without actually knowing this, the majority of NHL owners would have had a deal across the street.
One would have thought.
again, there's a development that's going in there to, and you could have painted it like you talk about what do you get out of it by being in a partnership. You know what you'd get? Mm-hmm. You'd have a community center there that would have either the Aquilini family name on it or the Canucks brand on it. That would be like, we've done this in association with the community.
It under the late matriarch Lisa Aquilini facility,
or Luigi, or what have you, and it would be that rink. And you don't own every aspect of it because it's on somebody else's land, but there would be really good
community value
and vibes coming from that. You'd have something to hold on to there. The players have the same parking spot. They've got the same commute every single day. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's right there, and it's not even too late in this very second because there's not a shovel on the ground at Plaza of Nations.
No,
but they're unwilling to do it.
But that would require the Aquilinis understanding goodwill. And that is something they don't understand. The Aquilinis understand we win business deals, we don't lose business deals. They overplayed their hand with Abbotsford Center a number of years ago, and guess what happened? The city of Abbotsford came crawling back saying, can you manage Abbotsford Center for us? And they got the deal they were hoping to get on that facility and then moved their farm team there. So it's those sorts of lessons that reinforce the golden rule, and that is he with the gold makes the rules. And that's the modus operandi that this organization and this ownership group operate under. And I think Jim Rutherford understands that clearly now.
Between that discussion and the season ticket thing, I would bet that Michael Doyle and Francesco Aquilini are squirming just a little bit.
Squirming for sure, because Jim laid it out pretty straightly, but I would be awfully surprised if he didn't signal what he was going to say today to Aquilini and Doyle. What are our friends at Yellow Dog up to?
Well, they've got great specials throughout the month of April, so make sure you take advantage and pick up the new 12-pack of called the Dog Park. It's a assortment 12-pack on special for the month of April. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores.
Yes, I picked up a 12-pack actually this week. Yes.
Yeah. Nice to see them in large format.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to our menu. It's brought to you by Greta, a fantastic spot to catch all the games home and away. Of course, you got all sorts of playoff games underway now, so pregame, postgame, check it out on all the screens. Your steps from the arena and stadium district. They got weekly drink specials, the arcade, cannot say enough about the arcade, and the street food menu, fantastic as well. 50 West Cordova, Greta. Let the games begin. Bit of a different show here today. We're going to have Jeff Paterson down at Rogers Arena taking stock with his observations and comments on everything we heard today. We'll also talk about the Abbotsford Canucks. They are headed to the Calder Cup playoffs and with home ice advantage in the first round. Plus, the Caps, they stay unbeaten.
Well, not unbeaten. 6-1-1. 6-1-2.
Sorry, unbeaten streak stays alive. Yes. And they stay atop of the West. Also plenty of baseball happenings, including the two teams that British Columbian baseball fans keep keenest eyes on. That's also coming up later in the program. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. And, I did not have a great weekend. I was on Jersey just because the value in game one, they got destroyed by Carolina. Do you want to fire first?
Pretty simple. I think the Dallas Stars
need to bounce back, right?
And they're home dogs. Plus 125. Love a home dog in game number 2 when they're trying to bounce back. Yep. They got a bit of a boost. He's not playing. Miro Heiskanen was on the ice, though, so they can see that that's happening. So they want to make sure by the time Miro's ready to go, they're not in a 2-0 or 3-0 hole. So
on the road, too.
I think they're going to be rolling like thunder.
I looked at that one. I also looked at Winnipeg, and it wasn't easy for the Jets on Saturday in game 1 against the Blues. Gave up 3 goals, had to come back. I suspect a longer series here. I'm not sure Winnipeg's completely over their playoff history just yet. So I'm going to take St. Louis tonight. Back against the wall, Binnington, right? And I like the value at plus 160. Breaking news coming in from Bet365, where every nail-biting overtime win is a barn burner. Every face-off hat trick, power play shot on goal, penalty shot, every suspenseful minute in between. Amazing. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365, an official partner of the NHL. Download the Bet365 app. Use code NATION to get in on the game. Must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. Jeff Paterson coming up next. So here's some price from the historic Wall Center.
On my way out of town last week, Matt, I called a rideshare app. Hailed one. Didn't call them. You don't have to do that anymore. And lo and behold, you know what car comes to my driveway to pick me up?
The BZ 4X from Toyota.
That's right, Matt. And I tell you, that was the best ride I've ever had on a Friday. Honestly, such a great vehicle. The back seats, I hadn't been in the back seat there. Gorgeous. So much room, and the ride was spectacular. That's the kind of car you're getting in the BZ 4X. Go check it out. Take one for a test drive yourself. As much as being the passenger was fun in the back, it is more fun to drive than it is to even be back there. And you get to do so in the HOV lanes, because we're talking about a 100% electric vehicle here, folks. This is continuing the proud tradition of Toyota in the electric lane, so to speak. So go check it out. Take one for a test drive. And right now you can get up to $6,500 in rebates and 0.99% APR financing for 36 months. Shop Toyota.ca or visit your local Pacific Toyota dealer.
Jeff Paterson is the host of RinkWide Vancouver, our Canucks reporter. He took in the proceedings at Rogers Arena this morning, which is where he joins us from. Jeff, did the ground tremble beneath your feet at all listening to this?
It was crazy for us. Was it crazy for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was seismic in there, without a doubt. But it's funny because I walked out of the room, same room, on Friday with Rick Tocchet and the players, and I thought to myself, nothing terribly explosive coming from that. Apparently, they were the warm-up act. We just needed a long weekend here, and turned out to be worth the wait. Yeah, look, I give Jim Rutherford credit. I mean, I thought the opening remarks were strong, taking some account for a season that went sideways, got into some explanations for some of the reasons, dug in a little deeper, certainly than we had heard from Jim Rutherford, aside from the quotes to Gary Mason in that Globe and Mail article in late January, but addressing really the reason that this season got away from the Vancouver Canucks. And so it went from there. It started with a bang, and there were several more to follow. So, yes, we've got a lot to chew on here in the coming days and weeks ahead for the Vancouver Canucks.
Was the biggest bang the bit about Hughes and wanting to play with his brothers and maybe even needing to have to bring them here, Jeff?
I suppose. I mean, that was the finishing act for the 35 or 40 minutes, but the fact that they're not going to exercise the option on Rick Tocchet, guys, if this thing goes sideways, this is a hockey club that's going to be without a head coach here by the end of the week. I don't think they want this to drag on. They talked Rick Tocchet up, had lots of praise for him, but Rick Tocchet now has some say in this matter. If they were going to exercise the option, we knew that it was either going to be here in Vancouver or he would have to sit out from coaching, but they've taken away that security net, I suppose, the High Wire Act now, and we'll see. Like, you know, they've identified that this is the guy that they want to be back as their head coach, but if it's as simple as Tocchet's giving them a dollar figure and they don't want to meet it, Rutherford addressed that as well, talking about the escalating salaries of coaches and the comfortability of the organization to get to that sort of number. So this issue is far from resolved, but, you know, in the grand scheme, as you said, an off-season course here, you want to know internally who your head coach is, but as you start to sell your pitch to free agents, obviously they want to know. I mean, they would have a head coach in place then, but I'm not sure that I thought that they would have to conduct a search for a new head coach here sooner rather than later. So really fascinating to see where this goes. And as we've been led to believe, one way or the other, it doesn't sound like it's going to take a lot of time to reach a resolution. So I do think by the end of this week that we very well may have a better indication of the coaching plans for this hockey club next season.
Allvin had said something different. Allvin was ready to leverage that option year. We heard that, you know, very recently from him. So does that sound like Jim Rutherford has pulled rank there and said, no, we're not doing that. That's not our style?
Is it the president of hockey ops, or is it above him? Like, again, if Tocchet has thrown them a big number, they may be balking at that, and it may be as simple as dollars and cents here. So where the disconnect is from the organization, I'm not sure, but you're right. We had always been led to believe, and we had only heard from Allvin. We haven't heard from Jim Rutherford in a setting like this for a while. So, yeah, something has changed, and again, we'll see if ultimately it's the coach that changes.
Guys, as we've discussed, exercising the option is not really an option for myriad reasons. Number one, would Tocchet agree to do that? Number two, you'd have a coach on the final year of his contract, and Rutherford addressed that as well.
Which is why what they said originally was very odd. But they said
that was tossing toys from the like they were upset that nothing was done, and so they flex that, knowing full well it was a bluff and it wasn't. There was no chance that was going to happen. Okay, Jeff, take on the Hughes matter and what Rutherford had to say about Hughes and keeping him happy and making sure there's enough cap space and even having to perhaps acquire his brothers.
Yeah, I mean, I think fans have to be pleased, at the very least, to hear the president say that, yes, he agreed with the question, that they've got to do everything in their power to keep Quinn happy. They recognize that this is a special talent. This is a guy that had an exceptional season. They've got to figure out a way how to harness his superpowers, because how does a defenseman get to 76 points and you don't have a forward over 50? And that's not a knock on Quinn in any way, but they've got to figure out when he's on the ice, how do they turbocharge those shifts? And ultimately, when he's not on the ice, how do they tread water a little bit better? That's in the short term, but big picture here, yeah. I mean, it sounded like Jim Rutherford was prepared to move heaven and earth to make sure that they can get Quinn under contract, but he also acknowledged that there are extenuating circumstances here. The O'Brien Burke line, when they got Scott Niedermayer to Anaheim, he was the only general manager that had his brother, and that certainly worked into the negotiations then. The Niedermayers played together and won together. Will the Hughes brothers do that? We know that these guys are tight, and it wouldn't surprise me if Quinn popped up in Jersey here to support his brothers and watch them through the playoffs. So, I think it's reassuring to hear from the president that the organization does recognize and value. And you would assume they would, but again, I just think it's important to hear those words coming from the mouth of the president of Hockey Ops. Now it's a question of how do you chart that course, and bringing the brothers here, not so sure that is a plan that actually is ever going to play out. But, we'll see if the Canucks hear from the league on that one, because we know Jim Benning got his hand slapped the draft the year that he talked about Steven Stamkos. So the league doesn't take kind of that kind of stuff, and I'm not sure that the Devils would either. But Jim tried to stop himself in his tracks, but by then I think the cat was out of the bag.
And we're sorry for our part in that, Jim Benning.
It was Subban, not Stamkos.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yes. He was the one that didn't say and Stamkos. The other inflammatory thing was about, the people above him making decisions on A, ticket prices, and B, the practice facility. He wanted to make sure that it was known that both of those things were not happening because of anything that they were doing actively in hockey ops. We talk about the ramifications with the league, with the tampering thing. Is there ramifications above Jim Rutherford with his answers to both of those questions on the practice facility and on rising ticket prices?
Well, and he had jokes, too, when he talked about he may not be on the job, he may not be on the earth by the time that this practice facility is ultimately built. But I think that in itself was news that, they've exhausted these ideas of partnering. Certainly it sounded like they had gone well down the road with UBC, and for whatever reason, that no longer sounds like an option. So identifying a couple of parcels of land, we get land's expensive. We also know that the ownership group here can afford. It's just a question of how much they want to spend. But, a brand new build, it takes a while in this day and age to get a house built, let alone a specific facility like a training facility with a sheet of ice. So, I think we're still this is going to be a topic of conversation for years before any sort of shovel in the ground, let alone a ribbon cutting and Canucks actually skating in this new facility. So, that's where ownership doesn't get a pass. Ownership wasn't present here today, but there's enough to go around when a season gets off the rails the way that this one has. And then, yes, they jack the prices. You can understand the frustration. We've all heard it anecdotally. We certainly have seen it in social. And Jim Rutherford wasn't backing down. And he's not wrong when he talked about, I thought it was good that he laid out sort of the economics. And yes, the National Hockey League works in American dollars, but all of the revenue is in Canadian. And so there are added costs, certainly, to operate a pro franchise on this side of the border. All of that said, there is money. And we know that this is an ownership group that's been willing to spend to the cap in the past. The cap's going up. The suggestion was that spend should continue. So ultimately, we'll see where it goes there. But, I feel for the fans. What was it? 17 home wins in 41 games. Not nearly good enough, in terms of the entertainment package. People want to leave the building feeling good about the team that they support, and they didn't get a chance to do that nearly enough, and ultimately one of the main reasons that the Canucks are on the outside looking in as 16 other teams vie for the Stanley Cup.
Center is the top priority of the organization, and they're going to need better than the available free agents, Rutherford said. Your reaction to him basically laying out plans to make a monster trade for a centerman this summer.
Well, he stopped short of pulling a Donald Trump in the Rose Garden there on tariffs, where he had like that chart that he brought out and held up for all to see. I was like, yeah, I mean, again, getting caught basically putting his cards on the table there, letting the world know that it's going to happen through trade. You know, are they going to be active in free agency? They've got money to spend, but he recognizes that in order to get the kind of player that they're looking for, it's going to come in a trade. And he also acknowledged that that's going to come at a hefty price. So, you know, I guess I was a little surprised that they went that far down the road in terms of revealing their plan and their path forward here. Now, he didn't name names, probably a good thing. But at the same time, you know, now I think we all recognize that first-round picks are going to have to be in play. The fact that Tom Willander is, you know, and that was my question early in the press conference, and I thought a startling answer there too, that Willander planning to go back to school. Like, does he now become a trade chip? I woke up this morning thinking we were going to get a little more clarity from the Canucks on the Willander situation and some confidence that this was just posturing a negotiation, and ultimately it may be, but if the Canucks have been told by the Willander camp that he's planning to go back for a third year, you know, does he now just become an asset to the Vancouver Canucks that they can use in a deal to address some of their needs and allow another team to figure out ultimately what it's going to take to get him under contract? Because Patrik Allvin basically said, we've put all this money on the table. It doesn't seem to be swaying him in any way. And it also sounded like maybe they were even a little surprised that he has gone back to Sweden now and is going to be skating with the Swedish national team. Whether he makes that team for the Worlds, we shall see. But yes, the Vancouver Canucks, as of this morning, have put the rest of the league on notice that they are open for business on the trade front and that they are willing to part with some significant assets to improve the roster here.
What does that even mean? Do you think? What you have to give to get? Like, Willander alone does not do it. Like, what are we talking about? Because the willingness to trade Paterson was also discussed, but at that point you're just kind of swapping out first line centers. You need more on. He said they needed 3 forwards, and I think he meant in addition to Elias Pettersson. You trade Elias Pettersson, don't you need 4? So, like, how do you possibly get a package that gets you a decent second line center?
Yeah, this is exactly the challenge that they are facing. And if anybody thought it was going to be easy to rework this roster, you know, they did some of their handiwork in season. I agree with them. Goaltending's in a reasonable spot as long as Thatcher Demko is healthy. And Kevin Lankinen obviously was a terrific ad for them, but you know, then the defense core that they have reshaped in season. But yes, they need help up front. And so, to your question, Blake, you know, first rounder is a starting point. We've talked about this as much as they don't want to probably entertain it, given what they saw from the 25 games that he played for them. I would think most teams would start their conversation in terms of warm bodies with DPD. You know, what does that get them in terms of a first rounder and a legit now National Hockey League, barely a prospect? Like, I mean, I think the plan is that he's going to be here unless he's somewhere else. So, you know, is that enough? Does a first rounder and DPD allow them to attack the center ice position? Do they have to sweeten that package even more? Their hands are tied, though. If they truly believe that they're going to get better here, they're going to have to be ready to pony up with a significant package of assets. And I do think that the conversation probably starts with that first rounder and a player like DPD.
Well, I wonder if Willander in the first round pick gets you Horvat. We have talked. There are going to be very few teams out there peddling first or second line centers. You basically have to find a team in transition. We don't know what's going on with Lou Lamoriello, whether he'll be back. But if the Islanders are looking to retool, I wonder if Willander in the first gets you most of the way to Horvat.
Well, let me stop you there, Matt. Like, first of all, that would require this ownership group and management to swallow its pride in a big way. And now Bo Horvat may not have control, but I can't imagine that he'd have any interest in stepping back into a group that essentially made a decision and looked elsewhere. So you throw the name out there, fine, but I think there's an awful lot of,
no question,
of chatter around that before something like that would actually come to fruition.
No question. Horvat has a no trade. They have to swallow their pride. I also think Bo wants to be a part of the playoffs going forward, and I also think Bo might look at it like unresolved, unfinished business here in Vancouver. But let's go bigger game hunting. He talked about maybe having to bring the Hughes brothers here. Ask you the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Would you trade Sun, Moon, and Stars for Jack Hughes? Jack Hughes with a bad shoulder, or injured this year. But does this become having to move everything you can to see if you can unite the Hughes brothers, or at least Jack?
Well, I don't think you accomplish much if you just get Jack. There's three of them. If the goal sometime down the road is for all of them to play together. But even before we look at it from Canucks perspective, like the New Jersey Devils drafted this guy first overall. All he has done is score for them. These players don't grow on trees. Like, I just don't see the Devils having any interest at this point in parting with Jack Hughes. So I sort of feel like it's wasted energy to even consider that. But we have seen players that we didn't think were available get moved, so stranger things certainly have happened. But, just the math, it seems so much more logical in my head to think that Quinn would wind up there, probably in free agency, but maybe through a trade if he indicates that he's not going to re-sign with the Vancouver Canucks. They've already got two. It's easier to complete the collection by adding one as opposed to trying to pry two of them and bring them out west. So I just see nothing right now from the Devils' perspective that would make me think they'd be interested in even entertaining discussions.
They are
about
small up
Hughes.
front. They're small up front with Hischier and Bratt. There was a time where they felt like maybe Bratt has to go because we're awfully small up front with Hughes and Hischier. If they lose in the first round here, who knows? But yes, it is far-fetched. But of course, it's going to have to be far-fetched. If you're trying to land virtually every trade for a first or second line center has some degree of far-fetchedness.
Well, as we talked about, you're going to have to overtly give the Devils the win on trade day. You're going to hope they don't win the trade overall, but on trade day, if you're going to make that trade, you're going to have to give them the win. You're going to have to overpay, and that would be a hell of a deal for the Vancouver Canucks to pull off. But the gravitas of again, the tone in which he talked about protecting Quinn Hughes was there, as you talked about, Jeff. Like they, protect the king, under all circumstances was sort of the vibe we got there.
Well, and I was glad because, again, we went 35 minutes or something, and Quinn's name barely even, I'm not even sure. I think there was one passing reference to Quinn Hughes, but I was thinking, like, so much of what they have to do here from this point forward is with an eye to getting Quinn under contract. And so, again, I liked what I heard, just the fact that they verbalized all of that. And, but I mean, look, guys, the thrust of today was Elias Paterson, right? And
the tone there. So, yeah, let's discuss the tone there. Because
I think we all leave, though, still with more questions than answers. Like, yeah, it's great that he's next door in the weight room already training, but he should have been there all season, and for whatever reason. And this idea that we're still talking about, practice habits and commitment and getting through to him, and like there's just so many unresolved issues around this player. They tried to go to bat for him, tried to believe in him, but stopped short of saying that they wouldn't consider trading him either. So, I sense some frustration there on the part of these guys. They recognize what Elias Pettersson is. The height of his powers can mean to this group, and yet we just didn't see it for so long. So the trickle down there is who's going to be coaching. If it's Rick Tocchet, what is that relationship? I know what Tocchet said on Friday, but does he truly believe in this player? Does he believe that he can get this player back to the levels that he's been in the past? And if it's a new head coach, that's a brand new dynamic then of a new guy having to come in, and I'm sure he has watched Elias Pettersson, but he would have to forge a relationship there with that player if the player is in fact back. So just a fascinating, it was already going to be an interesting offseason, and I think it kind of went up a few notches today with some of the things that were said, particularly about that player.
It sure did, Jeff. We'll have plenty to discuss this week and going forward. Thank you for your efforts there today, and we'll catch up down the week.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Sick Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center.
And next time you're out on the links and you're having the toughest of days.
Today, probably.
Yeah, is that for you? Yeah.
Probably.
Remember, there is salvation, and I don't mean golf lessons. Who can afford that? I'm talking about
hard
bogey
to do
juice.
those on course, too.
That's true.
Unless the teacher's part of your group.
But bogey juice can always be on course with you. Available in single servings, big bottles if you want to turn it into a cocktail. Apple ginger beverage, crisp, delicious, and suitable for when the birdies just aren't there. This is bogey juice. This is for golfers like you, and it should be with you on your next round.
I'm playing with the patron of Bogey Juice today, Jared Harmon, so I suspect he will have a stash.
He will be armed. Bogeyjuice.com. Use the code SP15. You'll get 15% off your order. It's the new summer drink that everybody's playing for.
We will have playoff hockey in this community. Alas, it won't be at Rogers Arena with the Vancouver Canucks. It's no longer at the LEC with the Vancouver Giants, who are out in the first round of the Dub playoffs. But the Abbotsford Canucks are loading up for their AHL Calder Cup playoff run. As we told you last week, it was going to take a miracle for the baby Canucks to finish first in the Pacific Division of the AHL and get that first round bye. But they did their part. They swept that 3-game California road trip to conclude the regular season. Wins on Friday and Saturday in Coachella Valley in Ontario. This after beating Bakersfield midweek. Colorado only needed one more point, and they got it, so they've got the bye. Abbey is the 2 seed, playing a best-of-3 first-round series against the Tucson Roadrunners. That's the Utah Hockey Club farm team. Abbey hosts all 3 of these games. Game 1 on Wednesday, Game 2 on Thursday, and Game 3 on Saturday, if necessary. Max Sasson with 3 goals over the weekend. Linus Karlsson, Victor Mancini, Danila Klimovich, Arshdeep Bains also scored. Final regular season scoring for the Abbey Canucks. Bains led the club with 43 points. Atu Ratu, Christian Wolanin, Sammy Blais all with 40 points. Linus Karlsson, Ty Mueller with 39 points, and Danila Klimovich with 38 points. So they had 7 players, all within 5 points of each other.
Well, outside of the most veteran of veterans, I mean, this Abbotsford team really
lots of prospects.
And as a result, though, lots of call-ups. And so nobody was close to really playing like a full AHL season. Everybody had their few weeks up with the big club. So the point totals are not gaudy in terms of their total, but their rates are all pretty good.
And balanced scoring throughout the lineup.
Yeah.
Klimovich leads the team with 25 goals. It was a very nice season for Danila Klimovich, his 3rd in Abbey. Karlsson with 23 goals, Jonathan Lekramaki with 19. The goaltending decisions are going to be interesting here, Blake.
Yeah.
For Coach Manny Malhotra and his staff. I should say the 4th season for Danila in Abbotsford. Still just 22 years old. And the Abbotsford Canucks set an HL record. They did not allow a shorthanded goal all season.
No.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm not lying.
That's really great defense on the power play.
Penalty killer extraordinaire, right? He wasn't going to
even on the power play
a shorthanded goal on the power
so
play.
So you and I, where we live, is basically the farthest distance you can be from the Abbotsford Arena.
Yeah, we're a ways.
What's it going to take for you to go and see an Abbotsford Canuck game?
Beyond this round.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they get the mojo going, then I will make the trip.
Like if they were playing one less bridge away, I think I would maybe try to see one of these 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm legitimately intrigued, particularly
I
because
think J-Pat's going out for us. So
because they've got enough young players out there, I'm intrigued. I would like to go watch. I think if you're closer than one bridge than we are, then I would suggest you go watch. It should be fun.
The other thing I'm wondering about, how much did Manny Malhotra improve his NHL coaching stock this year?
I think tremendously. Like, and again, this is worst case scenario for you that are Rick Tocchet fans, But if he doesn't return, is it crazy to give the keys to Manny Malhotra?
That was my next question.
I mean, like Marty St. Louis was way more fast-tracked than Manny Malhotra was.
Needless to say, I mean, a unique situation with the Canadians, right? They want a bilingual head coach. The other thing is, if the Canucks are not fussy about paying big coaches' salaries, I suspect you could get Manny a lot cheaper than you would get a veteran established NHL head coach.
Yep.
And, of course, if you're going to be leaning on a number of these prospects to play roles on your hockey club next season, and let's face it, Aatu Ratu, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, Max Sasson, Victor Mancini. He's already got some work with Elias Pettersson, DPD. Not to mention the goaltenders, too, Tolopito, Shilovs, if you're making a move with either, with Demko. So you would have a little bit of built-in continuity. Linus Karlsson, should mention. You would have a little bit of built-in continuity between your head coach and a good number of the young players that you're counting on next season.
And it should be stated again. He doesn't have a short resume. He just got He just doesn't have a lot of head coaching.
Yeah.
He's been on an NHL bench now for 8 years in a row. Like, guy knows what.
Excluding this one, but yes. This is not an NHL bench he's on, but yes.
Oh, sorry.
Right.
Yes. On an NHL bench for 7 years in a row.
And
then now a head coaching
job.
Yeah, so like there is a resume there.
For sure.
I don't know what's the
we all know Manny from his playing. Like a smart, cerebral, emotional IQ.
Yes,
like he ticks so many of the boxes.
And for fans that are fans of details and teams that don't take shortcuts, I don't think Manny Malhotra teams will take shortcuts.
No. The other question I have is, if not a replacement for Tocchet, does he join Tocchet on the bench next year?
Well, again, we heard Tocchet complaining last week about the part-time coaching thing not working out and that maybe they need to look at that. Yeah, I mean...
Well, two things. The part-time, which Tocchet name-checked, and that's Sergei Gonchar, but also, and I've heard Thomas Drance talk about this, and I think he's right, when you go with a hybrid model for your power play coach, like when the head coach has specific responsibility there, and it doesn't work, and let's face it, it didn't work, then you probably have to go back to conventional wisdom. Now, I don't know if Manny is a power play coach. Certainly his NHL career was less about power play and more about penalty killing. But, somebody said to me at midseason, they could really use a Newell Brown type of coach there. A veteran guy with oodles of experience on the power play. Power play being one of the many things that Tocchet name-checked.
But I think if Manny wanted to be an NHL assistant, he would have stayed in Toronto. I think what he did.
Yeah,
he wanted to come west, I think, anyway for family reasons. But
his wife's from
I
here.
think he wants to be an NHL head coach and felt like this is what he wanted to do. So I would be surprised if he wants to do that. But could be wrong.
Yeah, and you mentioned family reasons. For those who don't know, he married Joanne Nash, the sister of Steve Nash, and his son Caleb just finished his first season with the BCHL's Chilliwack. With Chilliwack at 26 points in 44 games. Caleb did, who's just 16 years old, doesn't turn 17 until June. Anyways, we'll be watching the Abbotsford Canucks this week and hopefully beyond. Remember how fun that AHL playoff run, Calder Cup playoff run was for Utica a number of years ago? Yeah. Looking forward to postseason hockey here in our community.
And here's the thing, because of how, and I don't mean deep in terms of deep with NHL possibility, but they've had contributions from like 30 players this year that even if in the grind of an AHL playoffs, which is much like the NHL playoffs and you suffer injuries and all that, they've got a roster of guys that they've been using.
They got depth.
They have depth, AHL depth at the very least.
Yep.
So.
Garrison Price from the historic Wall Center, where if you have your tickets to the big game, why not make it a full experience? Stay downtown here at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Ask for the Garrison Price rate. Some blackout dates apply based on availability. And this next segment brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. Spring preparations underway. Excited for opening day, May 9th. Now accepting online bookings for the entirety of the 2025 season. No need to wait. Get those tee times locked in. And if you do have a group of 12 or more, and you're planning a 2025 visit, you've got to get on this quickly. Those prime times are filling up fast, so get your tee time on hold with the club, and then tell them about your group, whistlergolf.com/groups, and follow on social at Whistler Golf. We'll do a golf report tomorrow.
And judging by the film I just showed you of my son skipping across the water on the slopes, we are getting close to golf time up in Whistler.
Well, Vancouver Whitecaps FC, they get a 0-0 draw at St. Louis. None of the injured guys return, so still playing without Ryan Gauld, Sam Adekugbe, Jaden Nelson, Matthias Laborda. Rookie Tate Johnson continues to play more than Jesper Sorensen expected. He started at left back. And some confusing officiating, Mr. Price. You've seen a lot more MLS games than I. I can't ever remember the final whistle being blown with a player in possession and with a attack possibility. Tristan Blackman, who is their long throw artist, has the ball. There's a possibility he gets it into the box for a good scoring chance, but that's that.
In fact, if anything, they're guilty of the opposite. And the game that I did, it was in Montreal, and there was supposed to be 5 minutes of stoppage time. It went 90 seconds past that for no particular reason. There wasn't any. And
he just lost track of his watch.
So the Orlando technical boxes beside us, they are losing their mind. Like it's you can hear it on our mics, because if anything, they're guilty of letting play go too long past what they have said.
Well, in some cases, it's warranted, right? Because you do have some time
pauses
wasting.
In that. Yes.
Exactly.
In the Whitecaps case, it was the opposite of he was so strict on his number, he wasn't going to let that extra play. And so the other interesting thing to point out about this week for the Whitecaps is, well, the obvious is the Thursday game, but from the weekend, both teams, Miami as well, also dressed their best 11.
Yes.
So nobody held back, given they have a semifinal cup tie coming up on Thursday. For the Whitecaps, it was a bit out of necessity because they didn't get any injury reinforcements, or the other way of looking at it, they were saving their injury reinforcements. Like, could Sam Adekugbe have played? But they were like, let's not. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe that was the case. And hopefully maybe for another guy, maybe like a Nelson or something as well. So that's going to be the hope, is that they were just saving those guys and not making them travel, et cetera, letting them rehab back at home. But Miami did the same. And there was a bit of a knock there, a limp off for Lionel Messi at the end of their match. So you wonder now how it affects. Still, my prediction right now, Matt.
Okay.
He still comes, but he's not starting, is for Lionel Messi.
You think he may come off the bench if they require him?
Yeah. Like, again, road goals are important. So if they're trailing, or if they are trailing particularly 2-0 or 1-0, and you don't have that road goal. Again, you don't need to win that match, but you want a road goal even if you're going to lose or tie.
The Caps not advanced on road goals two in a row now. 2 ties in a row, yeah.
So they know the importance of it too. That's why I don't think they can afford not to bring him.
Mm-hmm.
But
maybe not start him.
Yeah.
Caps are now unbeaten in 6. They remain in first place in the MLS West and still have that 4-point cushion. They went into the weekend. We said no matter what happens, they'll be in first place, because they've got a 4-point cushion. It's still a 4-point cushion. It's just different teams now, with Austin, Texas, and Minnesota in second place. They're even 1 point ahead of the East co-leaders in Charlotte and Cincinnati. Miami is the only team without a loss.
Yeah,
in MLS
they have
play.
They have a game in hand on everybody as well. So they may be there with the Caps.
So it's Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at BC Place, the big CONCACAF Champions Cup semifinal first leg against Inter Miami. And then it's a first-place showdown. Well, kind of, except they have that 4-point cushion against Minnesota on Sunday, the game that has been pushed back. This was originally a Saturday game, but MLS pushed it back after Vancouver qualified for these semis. And we can say yet again that no matter what happens next week, Caps will be in first place of the MLS West a week from today, albeit Minnesota can close the gap to within 1.
Which means,
with a victory.
Doesn't that mean that they will finish the month of April? Doesn't that guarantee that they finish the month of April in first place?
I believe that's the case, yes,
So
sir.
into May, the Whitecaps in first place. Wow.
Seattle Mariners take 2 of 3 in Toronto this weekend from the Blue Jays. Incident Saturday, where Jays starter Jose Barrios had some angry words for Seattle catcher Cal Raleigh. He suspected that Cal was pitch tipping to his teammates. He started hollering at him after he was walking off the mound towards the dugout in the 4th inning. Raleigh stopped. The benches emptied. No physical altercation. And frankly, I thought both sides handled it well in the postgame. Cal Raleigh said, I'd want my pitchers doing the same thing. Somebody thought they were tipping. I'd want them to say something. Just how it is. Competitive baseball game. People are right in the heart of it. John Schneider, Blue Jays manager, said, hey, pitch tipping happens. Part of the game. Got to deal with it. Raleigh and former Jay Rowdy Tellez, the big heroes for Seattle. Tellez homered in all 3 games. Ex-Vancouver Canadian pitcher Paxton Schultz recalled Sunday Major League debut, one he will never forget. 4 1/3 of scoreless relief. Kept the game close. Seattle won it. 12-10 Jays at Houston today. 12-10 Mariners at Boston tomorrow. And the poor Vancouver Canadians, they lost all 3 over the weekend to Eugene. Just took just 2 of 6 on that inaugural homestand of the 2025 season. The good news is the weather cooperated.
Yeah, they got a ball in.
The skies parted on Sunday. A glorious day there Friday with a huge crowd. I made my way over after the show. Awesome first nooner of the year. Seas off to Everett for a 6-gamer. They're back home Tuesday, April 29th for a 6-game series with Hillsborough, including a Friday nooner. And plan accordingly. Get your costumes ready. A Sunday, May the 4th, Star Wars themed day at the Nat. Tickets 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com. How about the Vancouver Warriors? We say this every Monday now.
Mm-hmm.
They beat Philadelphia 11-5 Friday at Rogers Arena. Now a franchise record, 6 consecutive victories. They have not lost since the trade for Calgary goaltender Christian Del Bianco. 11-7 on the NLL year. It is the most wins in Vancouver history. They're headed to the NLL postseason for the first time in 8 years. And we now know the opponent and the date. They will take on the Rochester Nighthawks this Saturday, 7 p.m. at Rogers Arena in an NLL quarterfinal. They also did a huge crowd there on Saturday. Talked about how that could be a record. Heck of a job being done with the Vancouver Warriors right now. This should be fun.
5 goals against in lacrosse.
They just don't give up goals anymore with Del Bianco.
5 goals.
And it's funny because, when they made this trade, I reached out to our buddies Teddy Jenner and Brad Challoner, both on the TSN broadcast crew. We used to work with Teddy at 1040. Brad had the hallway right across from our studio when he was running Move FM here in Vancouver. And I said, guys, what do you think of this? And they said, well, they're not really the highest scoring team. Ultimately, they're going to need some more offensive punch. But this sort of, kind of like Rick Tocchet hockey, this sort of baselines the defense and gives them a fighting chance. And this Del Bianco, who's a former league MVP, a Coquitlam guy, he's going to be here for the next 8 to 10 years to bar the door and give them a chance night after night. Well, more than that. I mean, they ran out against Toronto last week and held on when the Rock made a comeback. And, you just look at the totals against them. It is sensational defensive lacrosse from the Warriors. And it's got them to the playoffs. So congrats to Kurt Malosky and everyone there with the Warriors.
A good bit of spring news here. You've got the Warriors and Whitecaps on a hell of a heater. Mm-hmm. You've got the Abbey Canucks doing what it's just been pretty good spring for the teams below the Canucks in the pecking order.
Exactly. Not a good spring, sadly, for the Canadian women's national hockey team. They fall 4-3 in overtime to the United States in the gold medal game. A bad line change 3-on-3 leads to the game-winning goal. And look, the rivalry continues. So each side now has won 3 gold medals in the last 6 years. All but one of those games was a 1-goal game, so another 1-goal game. 5 of the last 6 years, a 1-goal game in the gold medal match of the Women's World Ice Hockey Championships. And this was a great development for the tournament and the sport. They set an attendance record in the Czech Republic. 122,000 plus fans attended the tournament. And this is very positive because, as we know, our European friends have been a little later to the game with women's hockey. In some cases, that's a financial issue. In some cases, that's a chauvinism issue. But it was fantastic to see Czechs come out to watch this tournament in the numbers they did, and particularly when their team
their team played so well too.
They did. They got to the semis.
They may be the
up and coming,
the new third place team in women's hockey.
Typically been Finland, but
yeah, and they had a 3-0 lead on 3-0. Sorry, my soccer taking over. 3-0 lead on Finland in the semifinal. Finland storms back, forces overtime
in the bronze medal. You mean
in the bronze medal?
Yes.
Sorry, in the bronze medal. I meant.
Yep.
They lose. They're convulsing on the ice. Just so they're going to be disappointed at the best of times. But hosting, knowing the country was just buoyed by their performance, to be on the podium would have been something. So you have to feel bad for them. But a hell of a comeback by Finland.
Yeah, well, and that it bodes well going forward. I think that the Czech Republic are making strides, and that the fans there turned out and embraced this tournament as they did. No Worlds next year, of course, because we'll be contesting the Olympic Games in Milano Cortina, Italy. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results from Friday. We asked them, Blake, do you believe Elias Paterson will make the necessary changes to become the player and leader the Canucks want him to be? Yes or no? What did the people say?
I'll just go optimism. Yes.
It was no.
No, really.
But you were right to hum and haw. It was no at 51.7%.
Yeah,
so
I was
very,
torn.
very close.
Yeah.
Robbie, he definitely will next year, but what about the years following? Great point, Robbie. Like, when it's so under a microscope, will he rise up? But is he going to be there year to year? David, sadly, I think the answer is no, but hanging on to him is better than the alternative. Okay. Tim, yes, but I'm still not convinced it will be on this team. Could very well be the case. The tea kettle, the guy who never owns his shit, never going to be a leader, always has excuses. Why can't he just say, I need to be a whole lot better, and will do everything in his power to get there? And then Gord, I believe the Canucks won't love what they've seen up till the draft and will deal him. Yeah. Errors and omissions from Friday's program. Mike and I are going to split the airs. I said we're going to hear from Quinn Hughes on a certain clip, and then didn't ask Mike to fire it. And then when we did fire a Hughes clip, it was incorrectly set up. So we were juggling a whole lot in a short window there on Friday with all those player availabilities. Lacking anything from Yurki or the inbox? Thank you, everybody, for joining the program. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. And keep it local.